Chapter 171. 2 Bipolar. Devil. An eyebrow of Feng Tianhen's raised up slightly. That man is not as simple as he looks. If you are careless, you will quickly find yourself at a disadvantage. The youth was indignant as he tried to argue. Although my cultivation is not as highly profound as my chief here, but I am at least one of the higher-ranked pugilists throughout the entire Constellation continent. Would I be unable to deal with a mere skirt chaser like him? That's right. The way he sees it, that man is just a lecherous skirt chaser, who is vying for the same woman with the chief. But besides being rather good-looking with tricks to beguile young ladies, and possessing some petty skills in martial arts, that man is a useless good-for-nothing. If those thoughts were made known to a certain someone, he would surely laugh himself to death. As the lord of the dark lands in cloud heaven, he was thought to be a petty skirt chaser who preys on young ladies. What a hopeless failure. Seeing that the youth's mind was made up, Feng Tianhen was helpless, but he did not reject the youth. Just as well, it will be a good opportunity to test just how deep this Liu Baiqian is. Having gained Feng Tianhen's silent acquiescence, the youth went away delightedly, leaving Feng Tianhen to remain there in his spot for a long while as his face changed. If anyone were to walk past, they would have seen that strange side of the gentle and refined-looking man. The absolutely flawless countenance, looking as if it had split in two halves, to become two completely different people. One side of the face had an evil, sinister smile hanging from it, while the other side looked like the face of a bumbling, naive youth. The man clawed at his head in agony. "You devil! Get out of my body! Get the hell out!" The heart-rending roar of rage tore through the air, not fading for a good while. It was like two completely different split personalities, locked in a mad struggle to gain control over the body. Ha ha ha. You're being disobedient again? What do you mean by saying it's your body? You and I are one, isn't it? This voice had clearly come out from the very same mouth, but it sounded highly sinister. What do you really want to achieve? Feng Tianhen's eyes were red, as asked through tightly gritted teeth. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The evil half of his face stuck out his tongue, and licked the corner of his lips. What I want to achieve, although you and I are originally one and the same, but this young lady is not someone you can covet to have. What did you just say? You had better not have any designs on her, or I will not let you off. Feng Tianhen said angrily. Haha, why do you think that you felt such a great sense of familiarity the first time you saw her? Why does your heart yearn for her so much? Because those feelings in you are all influenced by my memories. Feng Tianhen was greatly taken aback. She belongs only to me. In this entire world, no one else has the right to possess her. Except for me, and only I can. The evil face was sinister and bloodthirsty. In view of the fact that we share one body, I will not pursue it any further against you. I am satisfied with what you have done today, as any man who lusts for my Qing will suffer a life worse than death. Chapter 171. 3 Bipolar. Devil. Feng Tianhen could not help but feel his body suddenly turn stiff, as a bone-biting chill spread up from his feet. A head-spinning whirl suddenly engulfed his mind, and the man's split personalities suddenly reverted back to its normal state, turning back into the gentle and handsome-looking man, except for the smile at the corners of his lips that was not comforting like a refreshing spring breeze like it was before, but instead felt terrifyingly evil and sinister. It was the same face, but felt like two completely different people. The man narrowed his eyes. My mind will not be at ease leaving it in the hands of that useless good-for-nothing. Better that I rid myself of any worries by doing it myself. Night fell, and it was quiet in the faint mist sect. Except for Qingyu in the deviant department, most of the others lived together in the same place, close to each other. The effeminate-looking man had gathered up the fastest speed he had moved his entire life, to quickly fill the urns up with water before the sun set. He was so exhausted that he had fallen asleep, but his mouth was still incessantly mumbling curses at a certain black-hearted man. Under the year's end cold winter moon, the lake had frozen up, and he had to melt the ice in the water, which took up quite a bit of his time as well, which made it an almost impossible task. But that day's lesson left a deep impression on him. Among all the teachers in the faint mist sect, Whoever you had to offend, one must never offend Lu Baiqian. That man was able to torment you to death while smiling harmlessly at you without having to draw a single drop of your blood. Teachers in the Faint Mist sect enjoyed much better treatment, where almost every single one of them were allocated an individual courtyard and an expansive space for their own use. And Lu Junyao was a 7-star grade teacher, so he was accorded even better treatment. His courtyard was several times the size of those other teachers enjoyed, and not to mention the vast amount of space, it was relatively more quiet, and people seldom came to disturb him, and Lu Junyao could not be any more at ease. Bai Zhiyan's front foot had barely just left that place, and his back foot had just lifted when an unwelcome guest came in. But as that person's cultivation level was very low, no matter how softly his feet treaded, Lu Junyao had already sensed his presence before the person entered. Wrapped in full black clothes to escape notice under the darkness, the black-masked assassin slipped soundlessly inside, and he jumped back in shock when he saw the man enjoying his tea right in the middle of the courtyard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, is this man sick in the head? Not sleeping in the middle of this freezing cold wintry night, but is sitting here under the bitterly chill wind to sip on tea. Lu Junyao curled up the corners of his lips. Will my guest happen to be in the mood for some great tea I have here? He's really got to be sick. This is the first time he was seeing a person invite an assassin that came to take his life to sit down to have tea. The assassin scoffed disdainfully and spread his palms open. A transparent sword with a sinister aura emanating from it appeared in his hand, glinting coldly under the cold silvery moonlight. Chapter 171. For bipolar. Devil, today is the day your time is up. An eyebrow raised up on Lu Junyao's face. Did he hear the man correctly? Did the man just say that he came here to kill him? After understanding the man's intentions, Lu Junyao was not able to hold back his laughter, his chest heaving up and down greatly. Interesting. How many years has it been? He had not thought that he would encounter something so interesting. Ambushes and assassinations were common happenings in Cloud Heaven, but here in this low-level lands, it was the very first time it was happening to him. But he can't help but wonder, who was it that he had come to hinder? It was probably because the bewilderment on his face was clear to see, and the assassin opened his mouth to say helpfully, if you need to know what to blame this on, then blame it on your own lecherous nature, to dare to covet my chief's woman. Lecherous nature? Me. Lu Junyao grew even more curious. And who might your chief be? There is no need for a dead person to know too much. And who was the one who brought it up in the first place? The assassin gave a stifled shout, and he was already charging forward fiercely in attack. Lu Junyao did not make any attempt to dodge, but waited till the assassin came in close before he moved his body slightly to the side, to avoid the ferocious blow that was aimed right at him. The assassin's eyes flashed with a sharp glint, never expecting that his opponent would be as skilled as this, to be able to avoid his attack. Realizing that the target would not be easy to deal with, the assassin pulled out a small calabash gourd from his hip and plucked off its stopper. Throwing his head back, he gulped down the contents inside and threw the gourd down to the ground. In an instant his eyes turned red, and the aura surrounding his body became more powerful. Lu Junyao's nose twitched, and he glanced at the gourd on the ground. This scent. Wine. Now die. After consuming the wine, the assassin's speed became faster, and the power of his attacks became stronger. But in Lu Junyao's eyes, his movements were full of openings, and not worth a mention from him at all. He had initially been delighted that he was going to be able to have some fun with the dumb assassin for a while. But he suddenly sensed the presence of another aura at another place, and his eyes narrowed sharply, to shoot out a brilliant violet ray that struck the assassin squarely. His body immediately rocked with violent spasms, before he fell into a dead faint. With a flick of his sleeve, the unconscious person lying on the ground disappeared without a trace in a blink. In the very next moment, a maliciously evil-sounding voice rang out. You're truly not someone simple. Lu Junyao turned to gaze to look towards the source of his voice. The man in white was someone familiar to him, someone he had seen earlier that day. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Feng Tianhen? The man walked slowly over as he approached, and it was probably due to the overpowering evil aura he exuded was far too contrasting to the person he had met. That caused Lu Junyao to knit up his brows to say in a sure tone, "You are not Feng Tianhen." The face was the same, but the difference in their auras was like heaven and earth. If the Feng Tianhen that people usually saw was just a nauseating pretentious hypocrite, this manifestation of evil right here must be his true unmasked form, a person that anyone would want to avoid. Chapter 172. 1. Only by killing him will you be truly freed. The man with an evil smile on his lips moved to come right before Lu Junyao in an instant, looking at him right out of the corner of his eye as he asked, "I wonder where our esteemed teacher is from?" That last strike the teacher just executed looks like the long-lost Iray technique. I would think that this tiny constellation continent couldn't possibly have birthed one as highly skilled as you. A corner of Lu Junyao's lips stiffened. You're not someone simple yourself, pretending to be somewhat human all this time. What made you decide to drop the act? Pretend. The man with the evil smile laughed. I am not pretending. This is the real me. Lu Junyao narrowed his eyes. Just who are you? Who I am is not important. What's important is regardless of how capable our esteemed teacher is, you will fall here on this very night. The man said in an ominous tone, although fair ladies will always sought after by gentlemen, but it is better that one does not carelessly go touch something that does not belong to them. Lu Junyao's eyes darkened. Hearing those words, a person subconsciously came to his mind. Is he talking about the little fox? Just how many pairs of eyes has she attracted? But there was no more time for him to contemplate further. At the moment the man's voice fell, a strange cackling laughter rang out, and a sinister wind kicked up suddenly. The evil-looking man disappeared before Lu Junyao's eyes, and in his place, many figures with disheveled hair and their heads drooping down appeared. Several tens of human-shaped puppets with stiff hard bodies. I have not used this puppetry technique of mine for many years, and I think it's great for our esteemed teacher to work up a sweat with. Puppetry technique. Lu Junyao's eyes deepened. Among the many different kinds of professions throughout the lands, the puppetry technique was most rarely seen. Not to mention this was in a low-level land. Even in Cloud Heaven, there couldn't possibly be more than 5 puppeteers. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Throughout time, people who were puppeteers were all unparalleled experts, able to control any person, and excelling in powerful mental attacks. Many a time, highly skilled experts with profound powers of cultivation had also found themselves disadvantaged in a bout against a puppeteer. In the eyes of people in the world, a puppeteer was the manifestation of all the evil in the world, put in a single body. They cultivated in the arts of devilry, using live people as sacrifices, and tempering them into weapons impenetrable by blade or spear, impervious to the elemental powers. They were turned into killing machines imbued with lethal poison that knew no exhaustion nor pain. A single puppet capable of battling 100 on the battlefield. Since far ancient times, many imperial families would pay heavenly prices to recruit puppeteers, getting them to create puppets with unmatchable powers to do their bidding. When 2 kingdoms engaged in war, just those puppets alone would allow them to gain victory, without having to lose a single foot soldier. But as puppetry was just too heinously evil, during a highly tumultuous incident of great calamity, a mighty pugilist joined forces with the ruler of a powerful kingdom to embark on a relentless crusade to annihilate these nefarious puppeteers, wiping out the entire puppeteer sect, and burned all the texts and manuals relating to the cultivation of puppetry. An order was then given that any puppeteers discovered henceforth was to be executed without exception. Chapter 172. 2. Only by killing him will you be truly freed. From then on, the puppeteer sect fell into non-existence. Even though several hundred years have passed since that incident, and over that long period of time, it was not known when a puppeteer appeared again, but there was no example of the malevolent use of human sacrifice ever found, and it looked as if puppeteers were developing towards a more positive direction. So people grew to become less averse to them. But what was Lu Junyao seeing here before his eyes? They were clearly puppets created from humans. Lu Junyao's face grew grave, and a fiery blaze lit up within his eyes. The sacrifice of humans in puppetry has been forbidden for hundreds of years, and you have actually broken that taboo. Aren't you afraid that you will incur the wrath of the world upon you? Taboo? Ha 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 ha. I make the rules here under these heavens. So what if I am reviled by the world? I will stand at the pinnacle of this world sooner or later, to become the king of the entire land. The man who remained hidden broke out into highly arrogant laughter, his voice confident with voracious ambition, filled with utter contempt for the rest of the world. At the same moment that his voice fell, the puppets that had been immobile suddenly seemed as if their acupoints had just released, their drooped-down heads starting to move with a loud clattering. The arms at their sides snapped up with a swoosh to reveal long black fingernails at the tips of their hands. And on the faces that were veiled by their disheveled hair, bright red eyes burned with a light filled with avid desire. Puppetry and the eye-ray technique are both similar in the way they are able to control a person's consciousness. I am rather keen to see which of these two long-lost ancient secret techniques takes the upper hand. The man said in a sinister voice, and then made a strange sound with his mouth. The very next second, the lifeless and sluggish puppets then started to move at an alarming, fast speed. Their long nails were incredibly sharp, and with a single swipe of their hand, the thick trees in the courtyard were cut right through, falling to the ground with a loud crash. It looked like he had come here prepared tonight, and an isolation barrier should have been set up around the place. So no matter how big a commotion rocked the place, no one would hear anything. Lu Junyao's eyes deepened, and the jet-black eyes that had been altered were slowly revealing its true color from the use of the eye ray, to become an alluring deep violet. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU that night, the girls chatted for a short while before they all went to their beds to sleep, and only Qingyu, who could not find deep restful sleep, lay there with her brows furrowed together, tossing and turning, unable to get proper rest. For some unknown reason, her heart was just feeling rather perturbed. Suddenly, a violent shiver shot through her entire body for an instant, and her body tensed up stiff as a board. Qing Qing, wake up, don't you want to see me? Qing Qing, I miss you so much. We've not met for so many years, and you've become so much more beautiful. But I still remember how you looked in your bridal gown, and you were the most beautiful woman in the world. Chapter 172. 3. Only by killing him will you be truly freed. Qingyu's hands clenched up tightly into fists, her eyelashes quivering with unease. A look of intense struggle flashed across her face before her eyes flared wide open. That demonic devil is close. The terrifying feeling that made one tremble shook her strongly. Qingyu sat up slowly and pulled on her clothes, not waking anyone else as she walked out of the room without a sound. Her beautiful countenance was composed, but her eyes looked a little vacant, seemingly unconsciously bewitched by something as she walked slowly into a particular direction. Mistress! A surge of warmth rose within her palms which caused Qingyu to regain her senses. She raised her eyes and saw a golden-haired youth bathed in shimmering golden light. His handsome face no longer tinged with puerile innocence like it was before, but was more restrained and steady-looking, giving people a sense of comforting ease. Qingyu blinked her eyes in surprise. Little Burrow. The youth's good-looking gold and silver eyes looked at her. Mistress, I have completely recovered, and from now onwards, I do not need to stay inside Mistress' body to recuperate anymore, but stand shoulder to shoulder with Mistress in battle. That's really great, Qingyu said after heaving a sigh. Zhang Mai looked at her with a carefully measuring gaze, but did not see anything out of place, and felt relieved. He then said in a rather stern tone, Mistress, did you know that you fell under the effects of the puppetry technique just now? If I had not discovered it in time, you would still be under its spell now. Puppetry? Qingyu's eyes turned chilly. Do you sense it too? The aura. Zhang Mai's eyes turned to stare off into the direction forward and then said softly, It's him. Sensing that the young lady's aura was growing darker, Zhang Mai then said, I'm afraid that Mistress might forever be unable to cross the gulf in your heart, and will not be able to strike him. People change. Qingyu lowered her eyes and said emotionlessly, Mistress, If you really are not able to lay your hands on him, then let me do it. Zhang Mai held her hands and said in a soft voice, "This has haunted Mistress' dreams, and only by obliterating him completely will Mistress be able to walk out from it." "I can do it." Qingyu shook his hands off, and then went walking off on her own. The youth's gaze sharpened, the worry in his eyes hard to conceal. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU on the other side, in the elegant and spacious courtyard that Lu Junyao was at, the place was already a complete mess. Those puppets numbering several tens did not know exhaustion, and they charged up incessantly time after time. Lu Junyao's violet eyes with its highly destructive powers had expended all its energy, and were unable to do anything to the lifeless puppets anymore. Unable to attack forcefully, he could only passively defend. "My lord, let Yuji help you." Hidden in the shadows, Yuji, who had been watching for quite some time, became anxious when she saw Lu Junyao taking passive ground, and she wanted to come out from the shadows. "Stay there hidden properly. Without my orders, you are not allowed to make any moves," Lu Junyao admonished coldly. Chapter 172. 4. Only by killing him will you be truly freed. The puppets almost seemed to have no weaknesses, feeling no pain, or could they be wounded, their counters becoming more ferocious the harder they were attacked. Hence, before discovering their weak point, Lu Junyao could only choose to defend. Having Yuji come out at this moment would not only be of no help to him, it would only make things worse. Hearing that, Yuji could only remain hidden in place to wait for her orders, her eyes gazing around to search for the puppeteer controlling the puppets behind the scene. Damn it! To think that a puppeteer would appear here in these low-level lands, and had even come strike their revered lord. If not for the fact that their mission here was secret, the dark lands would have descended upon this place, and trampled the entire place flat. TSK. How dull. That's all that you turn out to be. You can't even take down my puppets, and you dare to harbor designs on Qing. You're just courting your own death. The man's evil eyes glazed over with a murderous glint, and a strange light lit up inside. The puppets that had been attacking heedlessly in no particular order suddenly let out a roar, before their bodies pounced nimbly, like leopards, to surround Lu Junyao completely in the middle, seemingly seeking to devour him. "My lord, look out!" Yuji's eyes stared wide with horror, and disregarding Lu Junyao's orders, she charged mindlessly right into the circle of puppets. She was the Lord's shadow guard, and it was her duty to protect the Lord. If she allowed herself to not do anything while seeing the Lord fall into danger, she would rather pay for it with her very own life. If she were to die, she would rather die before her Lord does. Seeing Yuji charge through the encircling ring of enemies, to stand in front shielding him, Lu Junyao creased up his brows and cursed in a low voice. He was just about to summon up spirit powers to immobilize Yuji to hurl her out of the circle of enemies, when he heard a melodious voice sound out far away. It was just a short 4 words, but that caused the malevolent puppets with their claws out for blood to instantly freeze in place. Blood sacrifice, banish evil. The faint scent of blood wafted through the air, coming out from the bodies of the puppets. A red light suddenly burst forth, and the puppets that had not suffered a single scratch throughout the battle with Lu Junyao suddenly wailed in agony, before their bodies blew up into pieces with a loud explosion, their mangled limbs scattered all over the place. But there wasn't a single drop of blood on the ground. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu watched the scene before her emotionlessly, and the golden-haired youth beside her said in a low voice, "Mistress, he got away." That familiar aura had disappeared before she appeared here in this place. Since he's already revealed himself, why does he not dare to meet her? Hasn't he been trying to draw her to appear before him? Qingyu turned and looked at the surprised Lu Junyao. "Are you all right? You're the one who isn't fine." Lu Junyao strode over to her with wide steps and grabbed her wrist with his hand, raising it up. He saw a deep grisly bleeding gash in the middle of her palm, still dripping with blood. Chapter 173. 1. What is his inner demon? Seeing the blood still seeping out of the wound on that fair-skinned palm, Lu Junyao quickly took out a square silk handkerchief to wrap around her palm, pressing it down tightly to stem the flow of the blood. What secret technique did you just use to kill all those puppets? Lu Junyao asked as he bandaged up her wound. Qing Yu stared at her wrapped hand without saying anything for a moment, and then went on to reply. I am of the purest bloodline, and my blood is the thing that all evil fear the most. But that takes a severe strain on your body. Lu Junyao's brows furrowed up as he looked at the already fair-skinned tiny face, now showing absolutely no color in her lips, her cheeks garishly pale, looking very frail. Only my blood is able to resist against the puppetry technique. Qing Yu lowered her eyes, and having not felt anything up till now, seeming like it was only at this moment that she came to realize it. The agonizing pain in her palm caused her to come back awake, and her voice was a soft whisper as she said, Did you manage to take a good look at the person who executed the puppetry technique just now? Lu Junyao sensed that she was rather emotional, and his face was rather worried as he asked, I am not sure whether it is him. That face had clearly been so familiar to him. How could it suddenly change to look so different? The evil aura that had seeped out right from his bones was impossible to conceal. How did such evil come to appear on a man known to be so gentle and untainted in the slightest, hidden so deeply inside, catching everyone off guard? That person, though his aura and mannerisms were completely different, the face he carried was definitely that of Feng Tianhen. No wonder. No wonder she had somehow just disliked Feng Tianhen deep inside her heart. No wonder she had innately felt a strange sense of familiarity about Feng Tianhen. So it was really him. He had really been reborn into this world as well. Qing Yu closed her eyes, and she unconsciously clenched her injured hand up tightly. The wound split open, and bright red blood soaked through the hanky. What are you doing? Do you not want the use of that hand anymore? Lu Junyao held on her wrist and pried her fingers open. The wound that had finally closed now split open again, the grisly red blood horrifying to see. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The look on Lu Junyao's face turned an ugly shade. Do you have any medicine to stop the bleeding? I'm fine. It will close up after a while. Qing Yu said softly. She possessed an amazing flame element in her body, and she had strong self-healing powers. Although the wound was rather frightening to look at, which would take most people 10 days to 2 weeks to heal, she would need just 2 days to make a complete recovery. Lu Junyao merely took it as she was pretending to be strong about it, and his brows knitted up before he summoned up his spirit energy to help her stem the bleeding. The wound immediately shrank by quite a bit, leaving a shallow-looking scar. Qing Yu blinked her eyes and looked up at him in surprise. Chapter 173. 2. What is his inner demon? The man's face then contorted up in displeasure, and he said in admonishment, You already have such a small, petite, frail little body, and how damaging much it be for you to lose so much blood. As a girl, you don't even know how to take good care of yourself. Qing Yu found herself at a loss for words. A short distance away, when Yu Ji heard those words, she almost stared her eyes out of their sockets. Did she really just hear that? The Lord is looking so fierce. Because he is being protective of the young lady? To think that the Lord, who does not even care that much for her as his personal guard, could actually be so concerned for a young lady. Looks like the rumors swirling in the dark lands had some truth to them. Those words did not only make Yu Ji indignant but helpless. Even Zhang Mai, who had remained invisible, could not help but sniggle behind his hand, and then said fearlessly in a mocking tone, Mistress, there's someone able to control you at last. Even the ever calm and composed Qing Yu's face showed a look of embarrassment from the man's actions, and she pulled her hand away a little awkwardly. Do you and Feng Tianhen know each other? Seeing her look a little embarrassed, Lu Junyao went on to change the topic. Hearing that, Qing Yu's eyes darkened, and she was silent for a long while. Immediately, the long-forgotten memories surged up like the incoming tide. Her mind was engulfed by old memories hidden deep down inside. Those memories that were also the ones she once treasured the most. Little Burrow was correct. That man would always be the inner demon lying deep in her heart, one she was unable to sever herself from, nor to erase from her mind. Lu Junyao had been watching her, and he had naturally noticed the series of changes in her facial expression. The immense grief and despair exuding from her body, almost letting others feel how she felt. Just what kind of an unresolved past could she have with that Feng Tianhen? And what is it that could make her fall into such stupefying and utter despair? It was exceptionally cold on this highly eventful night, and also extraordinarily quiet. After Yuji saw that Lu Junyao was not in any danger, she slipped off on her own to leave without a sound. Only Lu Junyao and Qingyu remained there, standing quietly in the night, the ground covered in snow and ice. The young lady's petite figure was straight as she stood, the tall and well-built man watching her intently, both of them not moving in the slightest. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Suddenly, the petite figure wavered and swayed, and she started to fall. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed sharply, and he instinctively reached out to catch her. It was only when he bent down that he discovered that the young lady was merely keeping her eyes lowered, and was not showing any other signs of discomfort. She remained there crouched on the ground, her hands hugging her knees, looking highly feeble and vulnerable. Lu Junyao did not retract his hands, but placed them over her shoulders, maintaining a protective stance. His tall figure crouched there beside her in accompaniment, his violet eyes rippling deeply as he said in a deep low voice, "What's wrong?" Qingyu had never exhibited such feeble vulnerability. She had always been the epitome of power and fearlessness. Chapter 173. 3. What is his inner demon shed blood then shed tears? Words that would usually describe a proud and determined iron-blooded male seemed to be made to measure in describing this young lady. Never cried since she was young, not even when she was born or when her parents were killed, not a tear shed. It was probably because she knew that she was a child that nobody loved, and crying would only make people detest her more. So she had not allowed herself to cry, never allowing herself to portray such a weak and feeble front to others. All the way from the beginning till now, this was the one time she cried. For the person who had had impure intentions right from the beginning, who had gotten close to her with an ulterior motive. The young lady's exquisite countenance did not show the slightest ripple of emotion, her eyes blank and vacant. It was a good while before she finally regained her senses, her fingers unconsciously gripping the man's arm. Her lips parted and her voice was soft. "His name is Qing Tianlin, and he is my elder brother." Lu Junyao was taken aback. "Then why?" "Huh?" Qingyu scoffed in disdain before she said slowly, "Isn't it ironic? No matter how much I hate to admit it, he was the one who personally wrecked the slightest bit of longing towards kinship with his own hands, and pushed me right upon a road with no way out. It was probably because it was too cold on that snowy night, together with the fact that she had once again felt that unimaginably evil aura that she could never free herself from, which had caused her entire body to tremble uncontrollably. And seeing this man before her squatting here in the snow together with her at this moment, she suddenly felt like she wanted to get it off her chest. Tell me, why are things like power and status so terrifying that it can change a person so completely? Lu Junyao saw the bewildered expression on her face. She looked like a terrified deer who had lost her way, so helpless and pitiful. Something in his heart moved, and he let out a sigh before he said, "When it comes to power and status, people who value it would think of it as something that is worth them pursuing it with everything they have their entire life. To people who do not care for it, power and status holds no meaning in their hearts. So the most terrifying thing is not power and status itself, but one's own inner demons in their hearts." "Inner demons?" Qingyu muttered, and then raised her eyes up to look at him. "Then what sort of inner demons does your heart hold?" "I have no inner demons. Would you believe that?" Lu Junyao said as his lips curved up in a smile. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu creased up her brows and looked thoughtful. Could a person really have no weakness at all? Lu Junyao laughed softly and replied, "Who knows?" The man's mesmerizing violet eyes almost seemed magical, and Qingyu was entranced staring into them. She saw everything spin into a dizzying whirl for an instant, and her eyes closed as she fell into his arms. Her breathing was steady, looking like she was fast asleep. Lu Junyao lifted a hand to brush a sliver of her hair over her face behind her ear, and then hooked his arm under the crook of her legs to lift her up off the ground. His voice was gentle and soft as he said, "You should get some restful sleep." Chapter 173. 4. What is his inner demon like a ghostly shadow? The figure soared through the air like it was no man's land, flying over great distances. Suddenly, the figure was forced to come to a stop by the powerful energy slash from a sword. Under the night, the figure in a suit of red clothes in front was exceptionally eye-catching, a sword in hand and a chilling aura swirling his body, an icy malevolent glow flashing off the green eyes embedded in the wolf's head upon the sword's hilt. That person was Qing Yi Li. He stared with a calm expression at the figure dressed in full black, almost melding perfectly into the darkness of night. His lips parted slightly. It's been a long time, Qing Tianlin. The shadowy figure was taken aback a moment before he laughed out loud arrogantly. As expected, the nose of an animal is sharp. Qing Yi Li snorted derisively. The aura emanating out from your body is just too disgusting, and I do not need to smell it to know it's you. Those words probably angered him, and there was no more mirth in the man's voice as he said sinisterly, I can grant you your wish if you seek death. Without Qing protecting you, there is no question you will die here today. I throw those very same words right back at you. The moment his voice fell, the sword in his hand was already slashing right straight towards the man like lightning, quicker than one can cover their ears. Although he dodged very quickly, 2 slivers of his hair were sliced off. The man laughed evilly as he looked at the hair on the ground. No wonder you dared to come challenge me so bravely. It seems like you've improved by quite a bit. But that is still far from enough. Upon finishing saying that, his mouth had already started the chant to summon the puppets when the expression on his face froze, and a mouthful of vile black-colored blood spurted out from his mouth. His eyes stared incredulous with disbelief. Qing had actually used her blood to suppress his puppetry technique. With that, not only would he not be able to use his puppetry technique, even his cultivation powers would deteriorate. If the blood seal suppressing his powers was not undone, his cultivation would grow weaker and weaker over time, till all his cultivation was completely obliterated. He had always known that Qing's blood from her bloodline was extraordinarily powerful, but never had he ever thought that it would be so strong that it could be the bane of his puppetry technique. She was indeed a priceless treasure that hid immense secrets, and he really had to speed things up. Crossing swords with Qing Yi Li at this moment would only be disadvantageous to him, and of no benefit at all. I'll let you off this time, and the next time we meet shall be the day you meet your death. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man's ink-stained eyes changed before he turned into a puff of smoke and disappeared into the air. Qing Yi Li's gaze turned grave. Damn it! He managed to escape. He had a feeling all along that that person was not dead, and now, that had been proven true. Now, he really could not allow himself to take a single step away from Qing Yu anymore, as this devil would surely be trying all ways and means to resume the plot he was forced to terminate in his previous life. Chapter 174. 1. Foolish girl. It has always only been just you ever since that night. Feng Tianhen seemed to have evaporated into thin air, where no one saw a single sign of him anywhere. Fortunately, people from the Faint Mist sect and the Deviant department are used to him appearing and disappearing out of the blue, and he would always be gone for long periods every single time. His stay in the Faint Mist sect this time was also considered to be one of the longest periods he had stayed. So his unannounced disappearance did not draw much attention, and neither did it cause much of a stir. But only Qing Yu knew that he had not just disappeared suddenly for no reason, but it was because he was unable to use the puppetry technique, and his cultivation powers have been greatly reduced, giving him no other choice but to leave. Otherwise, if he were to encounter any kind of danger here, the only result would be death for him. If not for that, it would not matter even if his identity had been exposed, and he would not care about that at all. But coming to know that Feng Tianhen was actually Qing Tianlin, the doubts in Qing Yu's mind were finally unraveled. That vicious devil had not only harbored designs on the powers of the sacred burial arts and the heavenly insights of medicine she possessed back then, but he had even sought to turn her into a puppet, to forever do his bidding as his slave. He had done everything he could to secretly learn forbidden dark arts in his previous life, and had gone against all moral ethics to make moves against Qingyu. All of that just to be able to stand upon the highest pinnacle over everyone, to fulfill his lust for power and status. Although his scheme had not succeeded, but unexpectedly, Qing Tianlin did not die as she had thought, but has been reborn into this world. It was not known how long he had lived in this world, and there was no way of knowing what kind of other nefarious plots and schemes he had been secretly hatching waiting for her to appear. Right from the beginning, Qing Tianlin's only objective has been to possess her. In order for him to reach the heavens in a single leap, only the heavens knew what kind of unconscionable and depraved deeds he had committed. And countless are the people who died at his hands trying to protect Qingyu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The ones lucky enough to survive was only Qing Yili, who possessed the bloodline descended from wolves. Qingyu could not help but have a nagging feeling that with the defeat Qing Tianlin suffered this time, he would definitely bring with him an even more nefarious scheme the next time he appears. Time passed in a blink, and it would soon be a new year. Although the Faint Mist sect was strict with their discipline, they were not unamendable to reason. Their disciples had not returned home to have a reunion with their family for many years, and so they gave their disciples a 5-day holiday over the upcoming new year. They were allowed to go home, but they must return back within the allotted time, considered as a form of allowance the sect made for their disciples. But quite a number of them were all alone in this world, carefree and idle without parents or siblings, so those 5 days gave them a chance to go indulge themselves fully. The winter's first blizzard had lasted for a good half-month, and the accumulated snow was just beginning to melt, causing the temperature to fall even lower than when snow was falling. Though the disciples possessed spirit powers to resist the cold, most of them still could not help but wrap themselves in thicker clothes when they went out. Chapter 174. 2. Foolish girl. It has always only been just you. Ming Yi, who always bundled herself up like it was perpetually winter, had finally taken off her hick fox fur cape during this winter. When Ming Jing opened his room door, he saw the young girl standing there with a grin on her face, and it was probably because of the chill wind that blew over her face. Her cheeks were rosy red, looking highly adorable. Big brother. Ming Jing was taken aback a moment before he noticed how thinly dressed the young girl was. His face immediately turned dark, and he took off his own cape to cover it over the girl. Why did you come out wearing so little? Ming Yi watched how anxious he was being, her rosy-cheeked face looking a little bashful. Big brother, I am not feeling cold. I will not be so afraid of the cold like before anymore. Ming Jing was stunned for a while. What do you mean? The corners of Ming Yi's lips lifted slightly, revealing 2 adorable dimples on her cheeks. My illness has been cured. Qingyu has rooted out the cold poison in my body, and I will not fall sick so easily anymore as my health gradually improves. Ming Jing's body stiffened, and the expression on his good-looking countenance looked a little foolish for the first time. His hands were trembling slightly as he held the young girl by her shoulders. Is that really true? You've really been cured. It's true. Ming Yi nodded with a smile, her soft hands gently holding the young man's face. Big brother, everything will turn out fine. Look, I will be 16 after this new year, and all those quack doctors said that I will not make it till my coming of age. Those were all just lies. Will continue to live, and will always be by Big Brother's side. Ming Jing's body stiffened up even more. His thoughts recalled back to the morning of the welcoming meet for all the new recruits when the young girl had come to appear right before him, obstinate and stubborn as she stared into his eyes, and had said those incredulous words. Big brother, I like you. I have liked you so much since I was very young. Can you wait for me? Can you wait till my illness is cured, and we can then be together? Big brother, I will not die. I want to forever stay by your side. So can you not like anyone else? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. For as long as he could remember, had always followed behind him, her eyes filled with trust, love and reliance, like he was a hero she had always worshipped. But never had he thought that things were not the same as what he had thought they were. But even at such a young age, the young lass had already been thinking of marrying him when she grew up. After he came to know that Ming Yi had left the Soul Cultivators tribe and crossed thousands of miles to come look for him at the Faint Mist sect, his heart had felt both anger and pain for the young girl. He was angry at those people who dared to bully and oppress her when he was not there. Pained because the little princess he had carefully doted on and treasured in the palm of his hand, who had never endured such suffering, was made to sleep and eat under the harsh open skies, forced to face countless dangers throughout the journey, and all of it had been because of him. The foolish little lass had always thought that he did not know anything, but he knew better than anyone deep down in his heart. Chapter 174. 3. Foolish girl. It has always only been just you. She had kept a very low profile in the Soul Cultivators tribe because of him, her frail sickly body wrecked because of him, and now, her leaving the Soul Cultivators tribe was also because of him as well, all because she did not want to be a burden to him. All these grievances a young girl yet to have come of age had to endure, suffering in silence that many people did not even know about at all. She had loved him so much, careful to not voice out. But how could she have known that she had always been the ray of light he treasured and cared for the most for in his heart, one that warmed his cold hard heart? With his hand held in the young girl's tiny little one, his heart melted into a puddle of mush. Wrapping the young girl's petite figure in an embrace, Ming Jing's voice sounded with a gentleness that was never heard before. "You little fool, I really do not know what to do with you." Held close against his broad chest, Ming Yi's face could not help but burn up as she then asked in a soft voice, "Does this mean that Big Brother is agreeable? That you will not like anyone else?" She was unable to forget the time when she saw her big brother being so intimate with another girl, and how bitter that had made her feel. The young man did not make a single sound for a while, and just as Ming Yi's heart was growing jittery with unease, a deep soft voice suddenly sounded above her head. Words that were the sweetest and most endearing she had ever heard whispered to her. "Foolish IRL, when have I ever liked anyone else? It has always only been you. What is on your mind?" Qing Yu snapped back to her senses, and suddenly saw that Qing Yili was standing beside her. "If someone wanted to ambush you, you would have already been struck. When did you become so unwary of your surroundings?" Qing Yili asked softly. It had been a few days since she had seen this man, and for some unknown reason, the aura around the man had become even chillier than before. Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. "What happened to you?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Tianlin appeared. "But you had probably sensed it as well," Qing Yili looked at her to say. Qing Yu's eyes flashed with a glint. And we even exchanged blows. I used the sacrificial blood seal to suppress his puppetry technique, and I do not know where he managed to escape to. No wonder when I encountered him that day, he did not fight me." Qing Yili immediately understood, and his brows creased up in worry as he said, "You must be careful. I feel that he has become even more powerful." Qing Yu clicked her tongue out of the corner of her mouth. "He has naturally become much stronger. Feng Tianhen isn't just a nobody by himself, and I fear that he might be someone who came down from one of the higher realms. Qing Tianlin could possibly have devoured his soul and taken over his body, as wasn't his flesh body from his previous life, so wrecked and ruined like mine was, unable to be of any use anymore?" Chapter 174. 4. Foolish girl. It has always only been just you anyway. He was injured by you, and he would probably not appear for a while. Qing Yili said as he gazed fixedly upon the young lady's face. "Promise me this. No matter what, you must not let the tragedy from the previous life repeat itself. You have me and many other friends, or maybe even that man. All of us are able to help you, and so in order to keep yourself safe, it wouldn't matter even if some of us are sacrificed in times of need. Little Yi, the biggest difference between me and Qing Tianlin is that in order to attain his objectives, he is able to give up anything, but I cannot. From the way I see it, the greatest meaning of my existence is to protect the people I care about, just to see them remain safe and happy, and I will be content." Qing Yu's eyes were serious as she looked at the man. The man's dark green eyes stared back at her with disapproval, like he was not going to give in, until the young lady's narrow eyes grew red-tinged, and her lips parted slightly. I do not wish to see so many people fall to the ground because of me. Back then, I had nightmares for an entire month, and my dreams were all filled with how everyone died. Every time I think back about it, I am still unable to forgive myself. But you killed him in the end, didn't you? Qing Yi asked in a deep voice. Probably no one else knew better than Qing Yi Li just how important a position Qing Tianlin took in Qing Yu's heart. Qing Tianlin was once the person who treated her the best, but was also the person who hurt her the most. Nothing was more agonizing than when a person comes to discover that someone whom you have sincerely given your entire heart to was just filled with endless lies and plotting nefarious schemes against you in the end. Qing Yu laughed softly. She raised her eyes to look at the man's brows that were furrowed up in worry before she said, "He brought harm upon so many people, and he will have to pay the price sooner or later. This is a debt in karma, and let me be the one to end it once and for all." The resolve and determination in her eyes sparkled like something Qing Yi had never seen before, the fervor seemingly scorching his heart. Gathered Cloud Loft. How? Any news of that person? Lu Junyao asked in a leisurely voice as he glanced lazily at the man. Ling Shu gave a big sleepy yawn. Among the White Fan Land's 4 great families, there seemed to be a common-born descendant named Feng Tianhen from the Feng family, but it could very well be just a coincidence that they merely share the same exact name. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Have you looked into this person's character traits, personality, and his achievements? Ling Shu rolled his eyes. Do I even need to look into that? Since he is of common birth, then he must surely be a regular nobody without any outstanding achievements, and largely unnoticed by his family. You must have known how clearly the 4 great families segregates their descendants between those of noble and common birth, much more stringent than people in the constellation lands, which basically renders those of common birth to have no way of standing out over any others. Lu Junyao then clicked his tongue before he said, "But from what I know, not only has this Feng Tianhen attained deep and unfathomable cultivation, he carries himself with extraordinary flair. Moreover, he is adept in the puppetry technique, so he cannot be just some nobody of common stock." Ling Shu raised an eyebrow. Then there are only 2 possibilities for that. Either he has been hiding a light under a bushel, and has been pretending to be a fool all this time, or this Feng Tianhen you are talking about is actually an imposter. The information I have gathered about the man clearly says that he is just an unremarkable disciple of common birth. Chapter 175. 1. Want to bring you home. Something must have gone wrong someplace. Go look into it more carefully, and see whether there's anything strange with Feng Tianhen in the past recent years. Lu Junyao's eyes grew profound. If I am not wrong, this Feng Tianhen in the Faint Mist sect is that Feng Tianhen from the White Fan Lands, and he is definitely not just any ordinary man. Ling Shu looked at the man quizzically. Why are you suddenly showing so much interest in this man? Has he offended you? Lu Junyao curved up his lips in a faint smile. He hasn't offended me, but I have merely become his imaginary enemy. Imaginary enemy? Ling Shu did not understand. That fella is interested in the little fox, and coincidentally, the little fox is rather close to me, so he then wants to kill me. Lu Junyao explained. Ling Shu burst out in laughter, and it went on for a long while, unable to stop. Not until a certain person's slightly narrowed eyes turned onto him, that he immediately found himself unable to laugh. To think the great Dark Lord of Cloud Heaven had an assassin come after his life for such a reason. That is really surprising. Lu Junyao laughed scoffingly, but did not respond to the man. However, Ling Shu then came leaning in close and said softly in a sly tone, "On the other hand, do you really have no interest in that little lass? You are always so highly concerned about her affairs. I think it rather impossible if you say you're not the least bit interested." Lu Junyao glanced at the man dismissively. When did you become so gossipy? Ha. I am just being concerned without Dark Lord's other significant half, and was trying to see if you have fallen for this little lass. I heard from Bai Jiyan that you got yourself injured a few times because of her, but the young lady did not know anything about it at all. She does not need to know about such things. Lu Junyao said in an indifferent tone. I am indebted to Aunt Lan, and it is merely reasonable that I watch over her descendants. Ling Shu's face broke into a mischievous smile. Is that really the case? Why do I feel that you've gone beyond just watching over the young lady? In the end, he had not managed to lean in close to the man when he found himself pushed back with a slap of the man's palm. Go back to sleep if you still have not come awake. Make sure you do not mess the serious things up. Ooh, guess what was on his mind, and he's hiding his embarrassment with anger. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, serve you right that the little lass still do not like you. What a waste of that flawlessly good-looking face. Qingyu, I will be going back home in a few days. Will you and Qing Bei want to go back with me to the Mu family over the new year? Mu Lai asked, suddenly leaping up behind the window opposite, looking at her as she leaned over the window sill. The Duke of Eternal Peace Manor was a place that Qingyu did not feel the slightest bit of emotional attachment towards at all, as she had grown up in there living amongst all kinds of devious scheming and oppression from the servants in the manor. Even her father Yen Su was not real, and after she made the decision to come to the Faint Mist sect, she had absolutely no intention of going back there anymore. Mu Lai was more or less aware of her situation, and she sympathized with the pair of siblings. Moreover, Qingyu was a few years younger than her, which made Mu Lai feel like caring for her a little more. Chapter 175. 2. Want to bring you home. Although it couldn't be said that it was all that peaceful back at her home at the Mu family, it was still a lot better than Qingyu's situation. At least she had a father who treated her rather well. Mu Lai was an exceptionally righteous and warm-hearted lady, and although people who did not know her well felt that she was unapproachable, an arrogant and cold woman who looks down on others, people who came to walk into her heart would discover that she was someone who would share everything she had with them, without holding back in the slightest. Qingyu looked at the young woman's bright eyes that had just agreed to it, written all over it, and she could not help but curve her lips up into a smile. That would bring you quite a bit of inconvenience, so little Bei and I will just remain here in the Faint Mist sect. It's only 5 days anyway, and just the journey back and forth alone will take up 2 days already. Mu Lai creased up her brows, looking a little disappointed. But I would really like to have you come, and my father is also rather keen on meeting our little genius healer here. We'll meet when the opportunity arises. You're going back there because you miss home, and I can be carefree and worry-free by remaining here, so I'll not be going with you. Qingyu said with a reassuring smile, before tossing an exquisite red and gold porcelain bottle to the woman. Which also makes me wonder if your father is feeling better already. Help me give this to your father by way of sending my greetings, and take it as a gift from me for the new year. It's just a small token. Mu Lai caught it and asked in surprise, "What is it?" As she spoke, she had already reached her hand out to remove the stopper, and a scent came wafting out from the bottle. Mu Lai's eyes then widened in disbelief. This is... I refined a batch of elixirs a few days ago, and these 2 heart-nurturing elixirs are the only 2 that were successfully cultivated. I had not thought that the success rate would be so low, and a good amount of herbs were wasted. Qingyu said, looking rather perplexed. Mu Lai's face then became even more shocked. You only refined 1 single batch? Qingyu nodded and then replied, I sure did. Just 1 batch, and I already wasted so much expensive herbs. If I were to do a few more batches, all those herbs I would have wasted put together would be able to buy at least half the Faint Mist sect. So you are saying that you succeeded in cultivating heart-nurturing elixirs on your very first try? Heavens! How is that even possible? Heart-nurturing elixirs are 8th-level superior guard elixirs, and one must at least be a superior grade elixir cultivator of the gold level before one can refine such an elixir. If a person of insufficient level were to forcibly attempt to cultivate them, not only will they not get the desired result, they might even damage their very power essence. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. More importantly, just like what Qingyu said, the success rate for the heart-nurturing elixir was extremely low, only at a mere 5%, which also means that only 5 out of 100 batches could possibly even have a chance of succeeding. And that last produced 2 at her very first try? And she was even complaining that the success rate is too low? She probably does not know just what a monster she is. Even high-leveled elixir cultivators with abundant experience might not be as lucky as she has been. She must have been born to exist exactly as what an elixir cultivator is to be. Chapter 175. 3. Want to bring you home. She had probably noticed that she was being seen as an unbelievable monster as she suddenly smiled sheepishly. Actually, it's not that big a deal. Maybe I was just lucky enough to blindly hit it right on the nail. A corner of Mulai's mouth twitched, but she did not expose the young lady, merely going on to keep the little porcelain bottle carefully away as her gaze grew warm. I will relay your kindness to my father. Thank you for being so thoughtful. Not to mention just how priceless and rare those elixirs were. The fact that the young lady still remembered that her father's health had greatly deteriorated, which was never the same again after he got injured, and having her refine these elixirs that nurture one's core constitution and capable of adding years to one's lifespan. Mulai was greatly moved by the kind gesture. You really don't want to do together with me? There won't be much people around in the Faint Mist sect over the new year. Won't you be bored staying back here? Mulai still wanted to bring her back with her. The more the merrier it'll be. Qingyu laughed. No, I like it quiet. Although Mulai felt a tinge of disappointment, but she respected the young lady's decision. All right then, see you next year. The other 2 girls living in the same house also packed up their things, in preparation for their trip home. It was thought that Ming Yi had probably revealed her heart to Ming Jing, as they were often seen stuck to each other, seldom coming back to the dorm. With Qing Bei's great gift, he was highly valued by the teachers after being admitted into the Soul Cultivators department, which greatly reduced the number of times he was able to come to look for Qingyu. He worked very hard in his cultivation training, and his soul power had increased by quite a bit. So only Qingyu was left back in the dorm, where she was able to enjoy the peace and tranquility. The rascals in the deviant department had always been an unruly bunch, and besides Feng Tianhen, only Luo Lanji was able to control those guys. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But as Luo Lanji had been busy making arrangements for the upcoming friendly competition meet between the 3 great sects happening after the new year, he was laden with loads of tasks on his hands, and naturally did not have time to deal with the rascally bunch. The 2 famed teachers in the department were always coming and going as they pleased, and as the new year was almost right upon them, they were not too strict with the disciples as well, allowing them to roam freely on their own. Qingyu had initially gone to the teachers' dorms to look for Qingyu Li, but found his room door tightly shut with 2 lines of words written with spirit energy over the barrier erected. Went out on personal business, will return in 2 weeks. Where had he gone to? Why did he leave without a word? Could he have gone to do something dangerous? She was engrossed in her thoughts when she suddenly bumped her head straight into someone as she was coming out from the place. She snapped back to her senses in shock, and when she saw the face of the person, her eyes blinked in surprise. What are you doing here? Chapter 175. 4. Want to bring you home, but it was only after she uttered those words that she came to the realization that the guy's dormitory should be close to this place as well, so it shouldn't be surprising that he would appear at this place. Lu Junyao supported her by her shoulders for the young lady to catch her balance, and he then said in a slight chiding tone, "What could you possibly be thinking about that has you so engrossed and walking around blindly in such a daze? Do you know where little Yi went?" Qingyu asked. She was thinking that as both of them were teachers, they would probably know a little something about each other's whereabouts, even though they were both here with their own motives. Lu Junyao read the 2 lines of words spelled out with spirit energy on the doors before he raised an eyebrow to look at the young lady. Qingyu left. I do not know what that guy is really up to. I fear that he's going to do something dangerous. Qingyu said worriedly, her brows creased up. You worry too much. That fella does not look like he will be easily bullied. And even if he comes to meet with any danger, it's the other party you should be worrying about. Lu Junyao said with a reassuring smile. I hope so, Xing Yu said with a sigh. There wouldn't be much people around in the Faint Mist sect for the next 5 days. Just bring the kid over with you to the gathered cloud loft, as there is nothing for you to do here anyway. Lu Junyao said with his eyebrow raised. Little Bei is in seclusion with his cultivation training, and would probably not be coming out. Qing Bei said in reply. Then just come by yourself. Lu Junyao said with his eyes fixed on her. You've already been in this place for so long. Did you manage to find any clues? Qing Yu shook her head with her brows furrowed. Before I came here to the Faint Mist sect, I had always felt a strong premonition in my heart, but that feeling has suddenly disappeared now. What would say caused it? Could someone be secretly interfering? Lu Junyao's eyes then flashed sharply. Speaking of that, I discovered a strange phenomenon just over the past few days. What? For a good 4 hours every day, Antlan's spirit fragments in the soul-nourishing orbs would become incredibly clear to see, like they were almost going to come back alive. Lu Junyao said slowly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu upon seeing the incredulous look on the young lady's face, he then flicked his clothed sleeves, before a scene came to unfold before them. Several soul-nourishing orbs hung quietly, suspended in midair, all of them containing the figure of a woman lying inside, where her incredibly beautiful countenance could be faintly seen, looking highly extraordinary. Qing Yu's eyes widened as she stared. The person that had appeared in her dreams so many countless times. And this was the first time that she was able to see her countenance so clearly. And she was such a flawless beauty. The woman was more gentle-looking than she remembered, her eyes closed like a fairy in a painting. Even though her eyes were closed, the air the woman exuded was one that seemed to draw people to her. And Qing Yu had taken a great liking to her with just that very first glance. Chapter 176. 1. A thug who blatantly teases fair maidens. A smile showed on Qing Yu's lips subconsciously. She's really beautiful. Lu Junyao laughed in agreement. She's much more than that. Antlan was Cloud Heaven's greatest beauty back then, and her suitors could fill up half of the entire Cloud Heaven. Hearing that, Qing Yu could not help but click her tongue. Beauty always invites disaster. Lu Junyao shook his head and sighed. You mean to say beauty bring unfortunate fates? Qing Yu's face changed, and a short moment later, she suddenly asked in a soft voice. Who was it that wanted to eradicate her so badly? She remembered that Lu Junyao told her before that her mother's spirit soul was torn into pieces, where even her body was severely wrecked. Just who could be so vicious and venomous to do that? Seeing the solemn expression on the young lady's face, Lu Junyao curved his lips up into a smile and said, When you are capable enough to know, I will tell you everything. Qing Yu's eyes silently surged for an instant, but she did not probe any further. He is right. Even if he told her now, before she gains absolute power, it would only make her feel so useless, and will only add on to her problems. Seeing that the young lady was looking rather dejected, Lu Junyao reached a hand out to pat her on the head and said comfortingly, Don't lose heart. You're already doing very well. Qing Yu remained quiet for a moment, before suddenly looking up expressionlessly at the man. Can you not touch my head? His nefarious claw still upon her head, which had not moved away. The man went on to say, seemingly unperturbed as he patted her head reassuringly another time. Why not? He still has the cheek to ask why not. The man's height gave him an unfair advantage, as the tall-figured Qing Yu merely reached up to his shoulders, so it made it relatively easier for him to sneak in an attack like this. She finally came to understand why little Bei's face always looked so mournful and indignant whenever she violated the kid's head. The wheels of fortune truly turns. And this guy here should not act like he's an elder, just because he's lived for a couple of 100 years. It was probably because the fury in the young lady's eyes were really just too intense. Lu Junyao did not continue to tease the young lady. He then opened his mouth to say with a smile, You want to go stay at the gathered cloud loft for a few days? You can also observe Antlan's condition closely while you're there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU right now. Qingyu blinked her eyes in surprise. But the new year isn't here yet. Will it be considered as sneaking out without permission? Lu Junyao looked helplessly at the young lady before him. Look around in the deviant department. Besides that small little runt, who does not command the slightest bit of presence in there. Can you even see a shadow of a single person in there? The small little runt. He must be talking about Xing Tong. Lu Junyao did not have a good impression of him, who asked him to nearly cause Qingyu to be hurt. Even if he was just a young little kid, Lu Junyao still thought it was unforgivable. But after hearing Lu Junyao say that, Qingyu realized that she really had not seen anybody. Chapter 176. 2. A thug who blatantly teases fair maidens. So, had those scoundrels really brazenly sneaked their way outside? The faint mist sex rules and regulations had become merely decorative now? Nobody was around anymore, so why should she still be so law-abiding? With that thought in mind, Qingyu then nodded. All right then. Having been in the faint mist sect for 2 months, when Bai Jiyan, whom she had not met for quite some time, saw her coming in, his face broke into an earnest smile. Little Qingyu, I have not seen you for so long, and you seem to have grown taller again. Qingyu was at a loss for words. What kind of a greeting was that? Shouldn't he praise her for having become more beautiful or something? This master and servant pair really has one weirder than the other. Seeing her seeming to ignore him like that, Bai Jiyan rubbed his nose awkwardly, and it was only after some time that he came to realize that he must have said something wrong. Don't get all huffed up. I was just trying to make a joke, as I was afraid that we've grown distant after not seeing you for such a long time. Bai Jiyan quickly tried to salvage the situation. Qingyu looked at him expressionlessly. Were we ever on familiar terms? The smile on Bai Jiyan's face gradually froze stiffly in place. Isn't it always said that girls do not like anyone picking on their looks at all? Was this young lady different from others, and was bothered by her height instead? Bai Jiyan turned to look pleadingly at Lu Junyao for help, but discovered that the man was not even looking at him at all. His eyes were lowered, looking at Qingyu as he said, Go upstairs and see which room you like. There are many empty rooms on the 2nd and 3rd levels. I'm not picky. It's only for a few days anyway. Qingyu said with a smile. That will not do. It is not often that you come here to stay at the Gathered Cloud Loft, so you must naturally stay in the best room and eat the best food. Bai Jiyan interjected quickly without waiting for Qingyu to reply, and then called out, Lianji. Immediately, a seductive woman dressed in a pink dress came shuffling in. The corners of Qingyu's mouth curved up. Lian Er, it's been a long time since I saw you. Ever since Lu Junyao's condition improved, Lianji had not been seen in the Gathered Cloud Loft anymore, and it was not known where she had been sent off to. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. In a blink a year had passed. Back when Qingyu was always dressed up as a man, she had frequently patronized the fragrance court that Lianji was in charge of. Disguised as a man, Qingyu had looked really captivating back then, and Lianji had often teased and flirted with her. And as Qingyu was quite adept as well, if Lianji were some young naive romantic, her heart might really have been stolen away. Lianji had never seen Qingyu in women's dress before, and when she suddenly heard that highly familiar tone from Qingyu, Lianji could not help but be taken aback a moment, merely finding the young lady a little familiar, but just could not recall who she was. Qingyu laughed secretly to herself inside, and a wicked thought came into her mind. Completely disregarding the other 2 men watching them, Qingyu reached a hand out so naturally, and hooked her finger under Lianji's chin. Chapter 176. 3. A thug who blatantly teases fair maidens. Lu Junyao and Bai Jiyan were stunned for a moment, never expecting the young lady to suddenly carry out such an action. She was tall and slender, a little taller than Lianji, so Lianji had to raise her head to look up slightly. The scene was one of a thug blatantly teasing a young fair maiden, and with Lianji too shocked to react for a moment, she looked so very pitiful. Lian Er is really heartless. We merely have not met for some time, and you have forgotten all about me already. Looks like all those sweet proclamations that you'll marry no one else but me were just lies. Upon saying that, the expression on Qing Yu's face looked highly hurt as she sighed a long sigh. Lian Ji was so shocked that her eyes nearly popped out from her head as she stared. This familiar manner of speech, that look of a prodigious wastrel on the exquisitely alluring countenance of this young lady. Could she possibly be young Master Qing? Lian Ji whispered hesitantly. As expected, the arc at the corners of the young lady's lips deepened. That's right. You're a girl. Lian Ji regained her senses and slapped Qing Yu's hand away as her beautiful eyes looked the young lady before her with a measuring gaze from head to toe, seemingly trying to ascertain something. Her eyes hovered over the protruding chest area for a second, before she silently accepted that to be a fact. It was probably due to the fact that the expression on Lian Ji's face showed that she was completely stumped for words. Lu Junyao's curiosity was piqued. He raised an eyebrow and then said, "The two of you know each other? And something interesting seems to have happened between you?" Qing Yu replied smilingly, "It's nothing really. I was just too suave and handsome looking when I was dressed as a man back then, making everyone who laid eyes on me can't help but fall in love. And Lian Er here was immediately smitten at first sight, proclaiming that she would marry no one else but me." Lian Ji remained silent. She was really starting to suspect whether this person was actually really a man disguised as a girl. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU such a thuggish scoundrel who distorts the truth without even batting an eyelid. How could all this possibly be from a delicate young lady? And what kind of words did she just use? Smitten at first sight and will marry no one else but her. Tui. That scoundrel had been the despicable and shameless one, always coming to flirt and tease her. And she had merely played along only because she thought that scoundrel to be a rather interesting character. Hearing that, the interest on Lu Junyao's face intensified, and he looked at Lian Ji with an indiscernible smile. So that is the type of men that Lian Ji likes. Lian Ji was immediately greatly embarrassed, wishing that she could dig a hole in the ground to hide herself in. The look of the Lord's face was just too scary, and she rushed to stammer haltingly as she tried to explain herself. "No, my lord, this is all just a misunderstanding." Chapter 176. 4. A thug who blatantly teases fair maidens. You must be joking. This person here is the Lord's benefactor who saved his life. Someone even the higher-ups back in the Dark Lands will hold in reverence. Not to mention that she was a woman. Even if it was really a man, she wouldn't dare to harbor any thoughts at all. Lian Ji then turned her pleading gaze towards Bai Zhiyan. She was one of Bai Zhiyan's subordinates, and Bai Zhiyan would naturally not leave her to drown without lifting a finger. He laughed out loud and tried to smooth things over. "All right, lass. Don't tease Lian Ji anymore, and just allow her to bring you to a room upstairs to get some rest first." "Sure," Qing Yu said as she nodded with a smile. Lian Ji then went on to lead Qing Yu upstairs warily, filled with jitters. Waiting till the two of them had left, Lu Junyao then kept away the smile on his face. "What is it?" Bai Zhiyan sighed. "We found a location." "Where?" Lu Junyao asked. "The barbarian tribe." Lu Junyao's gaze constricted. How did she get there? Her aura was previously detected at the outer perimeter of the barbarian tribe's lands, but as it was too overwhelming inside, our men were not able to go in. Bai Zhiyan replied. Seeing the solemn look on Lu Junyao's face, Bai Zhiyan then said reassuringly softly, "You need not be so worried about it as the barbarian tribe have quite a deep relationship with her, so I do not think they would do anything to her." Lu Junyao scoffed disdainfully. "For someone who has died, you think there is still any past sentiments to even speak of? Didn't you say he isn't dead?" Bai Zhiyan asked with an eyebrow arched up quizzically. The expression on Lu Junyao's face grew even more contemptuous. Even if he's not dead, to be unable to protect his own woman, he is no different from being dead. A corner of Bai Zhiyan's mouth twitched. "You have to use such venomous words? You're speaking of an elder here, and do you have to make him sound so useless? What do you intend to do?" Bai Zhiyan's eyes glanced meaningfully upstairs. "Were you trying to distract the lass away from here on purpose? Aren't you going to tell her about this?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EUMM. The time is not ripe. Lu Junyao said gravely. Keep watching the barbarians, and I will make a trip back to Cloud Heaven sometime later. Bai Zhiyin then said teasingly. Are you so worried for the little lass? If you want to go back, just go. There is no need to worry about things here, as I will be watching closely. I guarantee that no one will dare to bully her. That is definitely not what I am worried about. It will already be a blessing if she does not bully others. Lu Junyao said indifferently. The mischievous look on Bai Zhiyan's face intensified. See the kind of tone you're using here. Why do I feel that the relationship between you two is becoming more and more intriguing and interesting? But there wasn't the slightest hint of any mirth on Lu Junyao's face. His mesmerizing violet eyes tinged with a dark glint. I will not be leaving here for a period. Ling Shu has gone to the White Funland's Feng family to investigate into Feng Tianhen. I feel that this person will grow to become a huge threat in future, and we should grab this chance when he is unable to use his puppetry technique now, to have him eradicated as soon as possible. Chapter 177. 1. The fairy couple finally meets Cloud Heaven. The barbarian tribe main encampment Old Chi was in his own tent fiddling around with an elixir formula that he just got when a flurry of hurried steps was heard before the young girl's terrified-sounding voice reached his ears. Grandfather! Grandfather! Oh no! Old Chi snapped his head up, and then stared with displeasure at the little girl panting heavily to say, What's gotten you so wound up in such a fluster? It was a good while before you managed to calm down, her face pale as she said, Grandfather! I went over to see Sis Fei this morning, and saw that there was nobody in the room at all. I looked all over the place, but was not able to find her. Do you think somebody found her and took her away? Upon hearing that, Old Chi was shocked for a moment, and quickly forgot about his precious elixir formula, as he tossed it aside, before shooting up from his chair. You really searched everywhere? Did you search the places she usually goes to? Ayu nodded and replied, I looked everywhere. Now that everyone has woken up, I do not dare to be too obvious snooping around. Otherwise, even if Sis Fei was not taken away, I would have exposed her, wouldn't I? Old Chi snorted derisively. At least you have some smarts. If this was at any other time, Ayu would surely have been greatly delighted from the praise, but she just could not find any joy inside at that moment. Her tiny adorable face was lined with worry as she asked, Grandfather, what do we do now? Old Chi stroked his beard and then said, Wait for a while more. If she does not return after 2 hours, I'll then look into it with the Spirit Sight Mirror. The Spirit Sight Mirror was a very important magical artifact in the barbarian tribe that allows them to see a location map of the entire barbarian tribe, where even a single worm would not be able to escape its prying eyes. So if an intruder were to sneak in and manage to get their hands on the Spirit Sight Mirror, that would put the entire barbarian tribe in grave danger. As no matter where the tribe's people hid themselves, the Spirit Sight Mirror would be able to uncover them wherever they were. Hence, the Spirit Sight Mirror was of utmost importance to the people in the barbarian tribe, where with the exception of the chieftain and a few senior elders, no one else was allowed to even touch it. If anyone were to unilaterally come touch the Spirit Sight Mirror, the punishment would be to suffer 3 days' worth of whipping. And Old Chi happened to be one of the highly respected senior elders in the barbarian tribe, and so he had the authority to activate the use of the Spirit Sight Mirror. Ayu heaved a slight sigh of relief after hearing that, and she said, In that case, Grandfather, I'll go back and look around again. Go. Old Chi said with a dismissive wave of his hand. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Heavens know when will he finally regain consciousness. An old wizened voice reverberated inside the vast hall, followed with a long resigned sigh. Upon the ice bed that was emitting a cold icy chill, a man lay quietly on top of it. The man was dressed in a luxurious lunar white brocade robe, his body tall and sturdily built, his hands quietly crossed over his abdomen. His skin was exceptionally fair, the icy air from the ice bed coating his body with a layer of frost. Chapter 177. 2. The fairy couple finally meets looking at that face. Although it looked unbelievably pale and weak, the flawless beauty of his countenance was one rare to see throughout the world. Maybe using the words flawless beauty to describe a man might sound a little girly, but this man was truly prettier looking than the thousands of alluring and seductive women everywhere. But in no way felt effeminate, his beauty balanced just right. Even though his eyes were shut and should not be intimidating in any way. But there was a kind of person who would, beside bedazzling you with their flawless looks, make you feel he was far beyond your reach, seemingly high up on a pedestal of divinity, that made people feel an unexplainable fear in their hearts. A thin-figured middle-aged man stood before the ice bed, his wizened-looking face tinged with worry as he watched the man who was in a deep sleep. It has already been an entire 100 years, and you should have gotten enough sleep. Are you really intending to never wake up anymore? Two elderly men followed behind him a few steps distant, their faces similarly solemn, and the auras they exuded extraordinarily grave and depressed. The middle-aged man whispered many words under his breath, seemingly helping him recall events that happened in the past. His tone was gentle, hopeful that the man would awaken soon, but the man on the ice bed did not respond to him in any way. After a good while, the middle-aged man's calm demeanor seemed to become highly agitated as he raised a foot up to kick a corner of the ice bed, the ice bed seeming to quiver from the kick. His voice almost broke as he shouted, "Get up already! What do you mean by dumping this whole mess onto me? Do you think you do not have to care about anything just by pretending to sleep here? Let me tell you, if you still do not wake up, I will have the whole barbarian tribe mourn for you, and then make sure the name of the barbarian tribe disappears from the face of the world. Not only that, I will also make the woman who has you bewitched, the one you are head over heels in love with, suffer a fate worse than death itself. Don't you care for her very much? I will bring her here, and right before your very eyes, I will use all the most cruel methods of torture in existence to torment her, and let you have a taste of suffering and pain you'll wish you were dead." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He had looked so dignified, his demeanor high and mighty just mere moments ago, but he was at that moment like a raving lunatic on the verge of collapse, screaming brokenly, his eyes wide and red, a faint mist forming over them. The man was the barbarian tribe's chieftain, a man who looked to be only about 40 years old. But in reality, he had lived for an entire 600 years, and he was considered to be an elder, who had lived for quite a long life in cloud heaven. And the one thing that no one could have possibly ever imagined is that the young handsome-looking man on the ice bed was a person that was the same age as the barbarian tribe's chieftain, and he was in fact several months older. As for the reason why the two of them differed so greatly in terms of the age they looked like, it was due to a rule of life in cloud heaven, where when one attained a supreme level in their cultivation, the aging of their countenance would be suspended at that age, never to change in the slightest, no matter how many years pass. Chapter 177. 3. The fairy couple finally meets the man on the icy bed, had already attained the supreme level, at the young tender age of 24 and hence. Even though several hundred years had passed, he was still the same strapping young man he was in his early 20s. The two men were the best of friends through life and death, and they were so close that they would readily trust each other with their very own lives. They've known each other since they were in their 20s, and their relationship was still as strong as before. A friendship so rare you might not be able to find throughout cloud heaven. A few hundred years had passed in just a blink of the eyes, and except for several of the elders, no one else would probably know that their current chieftain was actually not the true chieftain of the tribe. After their chieftain disappeared for many years, when he came back, he was already in that vegetative state, lying there for 100 years and did not come awake. After that happened, the current chieftain had produced the blood jade ring that was handed down exclusively only to the next successor, to suppress any objections and to assume his position as the new chieftain. Now that so many years have passed, they have all gotten so used to their new chieftain that the original chieftain had all been forgotten, except for several of the senior elders. The original chieftain had always been a carefree and frivolous man, An unconventional chieftain who did not deal with the tribe's affairs all that much. A fella who frequently gave all the others in the tribe quite a headache. But who could have guessed that on a single trip away from the tribe, he came to meet a woman who would come to change his life completely. From someone who seemed like a kid who would never ever grow up, he changed into a dependable and mature man who was able to hold up one half of the heavens overnight. And it could very well be imagined just how big an effect that woman had on him. Though it was a very good thing that the original chieftain had become so much more matured. But having him now lie motionless like this for over 100 years here was also all because of that same woman. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Seeing the middle-aged man raving like a lunatic, the two elderly men behind him could not help but sigh and lament. How fate toys with us mere mortals. No one had noticed that when the middle-aged man said that he was going to capture the woman and torture her, the man lying on the icy bed, who had remained quiet, without showing any response, suddenly twitched a finger on his hand, seemingly expressing the rage he felt inside. But that happened very quickly, and he did not move anymore after that, almost like it had just been an illusion. As the middle-aged man continued to rant explosively, the expression on his face suddenly froze, and his feisty gaze swung around to stare at the tightly shut door before he shouted in a stern voice, "Who's out there?" The two elderly men were stunned for a moment, and they immediately saw the middle-aged man say, in a frighteningly thundering voice with murder on his face, "That isn't the aura of anyone in our tribe. Who is it that possessed the power to sneak all the way into this place? Pursue the intruder, and I do not need him alive." Chapter 177. 4. The fairy couple finally meets. The moment his voice dropped, several fleeting shadows immediately appeared in the room, and they went on to pass right through the tightly closed doors, like they were merely light formless puffs of smoke. The middle-aged man then opened the door, and went striding out while the two elderly men quickly recollected their senses to follow behind him. The chieftain's sensory ability is really terrifying. Someone sneaked their way in, and they had not detected it at all. On top of that, what were those ephemeral shadows just now? They looked like they possessed profound and unfathomable powers, and it seems like the chieftain is definitely not ordinary. The men had all gone out, their attention drawn away by the intruder. The door was opened, and then shut tightly when they left, but after several moments passed, the door suddenly opened once again, and the light patter of feet could be heard. Pitter-patter. The room was really just too big. Even with movements so light, the sound was greatly magnified, to be clearly heard. The slender red figure moved slowly, taking one step at a time towards the ice bed. Every single step seemed to tread right onto her heart. Qing Lanfei's flawlessly beautiful face was one of composed calm, her eyes staring a little vacantly. Her lips then parted slightly. "Was it you? Were you the one constantly calling out to me?" In her dreams, she would always hear the gentle voice of a man, calling out to her tenderly just beside her ear, saying "Fei air." Everything in this place was so familiar to her, like she had come here before, but she just doesn't remember it. The only thing she remembers is the voice that calls out to her heart, constantly guiding her here, to this place, this very person. In the blink of an eye, she was already standing right before the ice bed, her gaze quietly scrutinizing the man's extremely beautiful countenance. She fell into a daze, and before she knew what was happening, she was crouched down by the bed, her hand reaching out to gently caress his face. An icy chill shot straight up her fingers, reaching into her bones at the moment she touched her skin, a layer of frost forming over her fingertips. Fortunately, she pulled her hand back in time, and summoned up her spirit energy to melt the frost off her hand, or her entire hand would have frozen stiff. It was easy to imagine from here just how cold the temperature was on the ice bed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. With the man just lying on it like this, is he ill? Otherwise, at just a freezing temperature, how could his body possibly withstand it, lying flat upon the bed of ice and not moving an inch? Qing Lanfei creased up her brows, looking rather exasperated. Her soul was not whole, which caused her consciousness to occasionally become as naive and innocent as a child. She stood there staring at the man's face in a foolish daze, her senses lost for a long while. She found that he began to look more and more familiar to her, feeling like he was someone she was extremely close to before. Her mind had just recalled that one single thought when her head suddenly felt like countless needles were piercing right into her, the agonizing pain causing her entire body to fall limply to the ground, curled up tightly into a ball as she wailed weakly. Chapter 178. 1. First recollection of memories. Her head ached so badly, it felt like it was going to explode. At that moment, a stream of unfamiliar images seemed to surge into her mind, with at the same time also felt like she knew all of them before. Qinglan Fei. A beauty indeed, and such a nice-sounding name. A name one would know belongs to a flawless beauty just by hearing it. I wonder if I may just call you Fei Air from here on? The lips of the man with astoundingly exemplary looks arced up into a handsome and easy smile, his entire person looking just like a ladies' man who was always surrounded by countless women, as his smooth manner of coming on to a woman here was seen to be highly skilled. The expression on the face of the flawless beauty in a red dress turned slightly indignant, her beautiful eyes sweeping indifferently over the man, as she said just two curt words. Shameless lecher. The man who was used to having women deliver themselves right into his arms had never encountered a situation like this before. To be treated so coldly after he took the initiative to get close to the woman. Not to mention what his true identity really was. Just his face alone had been enough to attract an innumerable amount of girls to fall head over heels in love with him. But this young woman here had not only rejected his advances, she had even called him a lecher? Haha. How interesting. That was the first time they met, and it was thought that the encounter would merely be an inconsequential interlude passing fleetingly in their lives, never having ever thought that from then on. An inseverable affinity between them had been sealed into their fates. A suave and passionate man, reckless and unrestrained, who was able to coax and beguile his way around many different women to make them secretly long for him, but never once getting involved with any of them. This was the first time he met a woman who seemed impervious to his charms, and that had naturally caused him to grow interested. But what he did not realize was that one's interest had to be piqued before their hearts could come to be moved and turn into love. Having lived for hundreds of years, it was the first time that the unfathomable and mysterious man, who holds such a noble and revered identity, came to be playing the role of an unshakable shadow, and he was naturally viewed with nothing but contempt. But he just would not leave no matter how hard she tried to chase him away. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It was said that love will blossom over time, and it just could not be more true for these two people. Habits can really be such a terrifying thing. Without realizing it, when someone suddenly appears and comes to take up a place in your life, constantly remaining in your sight, their presence seeping right into your bones. Impossible to cut the person off. Qinglan Fei's tightly furrowed brows eased up a little, those beautiful surging memories seeming to soothe her headache. But very soon, the expression on her face changed, and the aura surrounding her became agonizingly depressed. Fei Air, I'm sorry. I might not be able to accompany you throughout this life. The last time they met, he who always loved to wear pristine white clothes wore grave and solemn black for the first time. Holding her in his embrace, he whispered softly right beside her ear. Chapter 178. 2. First recollection of memories. She did not know whether she was mistaken. Although the man was rather thin, but his body was muscular and strong. But the person embracing her right at that moment seemed to have lost a good amount of weight to the extent that his body felt a little frail. She did not know what to feel when she heard those words, but she knew that she asked him very calmly. Why? I fell in love with someone else. That was what he answered. At that moment, her heart had seemed to freeze up, and there was a wincing pain. She had always been highly cold and aloof, and this was the first time that she had seriously come to love a person. But what she got in the end were just these few words. In love with someone else. He was the one who started it all, and he's also the one who wants to end it. Just what does he take me for? after having pampering her so much like she was a dainty and carefree princess, till she was just about to hand her whole heart over to him, and she cannot do without him anymore. Here he was suddenly saying that he did not love her anymore, and had now fallen in love with someone else. This must be the biggest joke she has ever heard. She did not shed any tears, and even went on to show a smile on her face, a smile just as radiant as before as she said, "Then I must really congratulate you." After saying that, she turned around and left, failing to notice the tears threatening to surge up within the man's eyes. It was probably because she was overcome with grief that she did not notice how haggard and thin the man's handsome face had now become. She had once said jokingly that if he were to become ugly one day, and was no longer so handsome, she would no longer want him. The petty-minded man had always remembered those words in his heart, always paying great attention to his looks no matter the circumstances, where he would even use the best kinds of magical medicine to treat the slightest scratch, refusing to allow the slightest mark to blemish his looks. When had he ever allowed himself to look so slovenly and disheveled? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The man watched with red-rimmed eyes at her back, that was becoming smaller as she walked off into the distance. But very soon, the expression on his face turned sharp and angry with rage. "You lied to me." The blue skies that looked like they had been newly washed suddenly turned red like it was stained by blood, and right in the middle between the two people, a humongous six-pointed star pentagram array suddenly appeared, as a ghastly and terrifying blood-red skeleton stood in the middle of it. The woman who had just walked a few steps away suddenly halted her footsteps, and stared at the pentagram array right before her feet. Before she could even react, a sinister aura engulfed her as a grisly skeletal figure flew straight towards her. Fey air. The woman found herself being brutally pushed down to the ground, pain shooting through her back as she slid over the ground. Before she could even speak, she heard the man lying on top of her give a stifled grunt, before a trickle of blood spilled out from the corner of his mouth. Chapter 178. 3. First recollection of memories. The woman's eyes flared wide as she cried out softly, "You're hurt!" The man wiped away the blood from the corner of his lips with his hand, and helped her up from the ground as he said in a soft voice, "Don't worry. I am fine." The woman glared fiercely at him. "Didn't you say that you do not love me anymore? Then why bother about me? Wouldn't it be better if I am dead, and which will bring an end to all your troubles?" Hearing her say such spiteful words, the man could not help but laugh softly. "Look at what you are saying here. You sound as if you will not be able to live without me. Do you really love me so much?" In the past, he had always been the one pursuing her, pestering her, forever whispering all kinds of sweet and loving tender words. It was possible that she did not really love him all that much. That was good in this case, as he would then be able to let her go with his mind at ease. His words said in a joking manner, however, caused the expression on the woman's face to look taken aback a moment, before she lowered her eyes and said in an indifferent tone, "That's right. I do not know why as well. It feels like without you in my life, the days pass so arduously. Even though I clearly did not have you in the past, I was however able to live very well." The man's face constricted a moment, like he could not believe that he would ever live long enough to ever hear his woman confess her feelings to him like this. "When I first got to know you, I had clearly thought to myself, how could such a shameless and thick-skinned man, who is so completely bad to the core, ever come to exist under these heavens? But thereafter, it was as if I had been poisoned, unable to stop myself from loving this bad, loathsome man. And no other person will do, my eyes. Unable to see anyone else." She laughed a little sarcastically, and then raised her eyes to look at the man straight in his eyes. "Tell me, since you've fallen in love with someone else, why would you still risk your own life to save me? If you do not love me anymore, why do I see such tenderness in your eyes and such a strong reluctance to leave me?" The man's eyes flashed with a glint, and it looked like he was just about to say something, but the woman suddenly pressed her finger on his lips, her flawlessly beautiful face obstinate and determined. "I, Qinglan Fei, have never been a person anyone would want to offend. All this time, I am always the one who rejects people, and never has someone chosen to let go of me on their own initiative. And since you have now offended me, then it's not up to you to decide when to end it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, though you said that you do not love me anymore, it's alright. I will make you fall in love with me all over again, as your words just now has made me very angry. Have I been not obvious all this time? And that is why you were not able to sense how I feel. In the very next instant after she said that, upon the man's lips that were still heavy with the stench of blood, the woman suddenly leaned over to stop the man from saying anything, even viciously biting him hard, that left small delicate-looking teeth marks on them. Are you not able to feel how much I love you, leaving me just like that? Are you trying to kill me? She immediately looked like an aggrieved child who had just suffered a huge injustice, crystalline tears welling up and falling down her cheeks. Seeing a beauty shed tears always made one feel like their hearts were being gouged out. The man's heart quickly wrenched up in pain, his big hand gently wiping away her tears. His voice was extremely gentle as he said, "Fei Er, my dear, don't cry anymore, alright? It's all my fault, and seeing you cry like this makes my heart hurt so much." Chapter 178. For a first recollection of memories, then are you still going to leave me? She said, still sniffing in tears. The man's body stiffened in shock, suddenly at a total loss for words, standing there frozen and unable to move. Is it even possible to leave her? How can he not continue to love her? But something came to mind inside his head, and his face turned pale, his hand clutching at his heart over his chest. In there was something incredibly evil that was maniacally eating at his heart and preventing him from even thinking any thoughts about love and tenderness. He fought hard to quell that agony, trying to calm his tone of voice as he said, "Fei Er, listen to me. I will create an opening in this array in a moment, and you must quickly get yourself out of here. Do you hear me?" The woman creased up her brows. "You mean, you want me to leave by myself? If no one remains inside to maintain this array, then neither one of us will be able to leave." "I'm not leaving. Let me tell you now. No matter what kind of difficulty you are facing that you are unable to tell me about, I will not leave you here by yourself. Fei Er, do not be so stubborn." The man's voice was sounding a little frustrated. "I am not being stubborn. Do not just assume that everything you do is for my own good." The expression on her face was calm. "If we are not able to walk out together from here today, then let us die together. Fei Er, you said it yourself. In this world besides death, nothing else can separate us." The expression on the man's face was stunned. If this was in the past, hearing these words from her would definitely make his heart flutter with joy. But at this moment, he only hoped that she would be able to live well. Ha 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 ha, such deep love. Even my heart is moved watching. It was not known where the voice was from, the tender pleasing voice of a woman, that lifted one's spirits. But upon reaching the man's ears, the voice was no different from the devil's. It was probably due to her arrival that the pain in his chest had grown more intense. He clenched his jaws and said through tightly gritted teeth, "You went back on your word." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The womanly voice laughed softly and then said, "Go back on my word?" I gave her a chance to leave, but she chose to remain. Who can you blame? The voice was so familiar that even though she did not show herself, Qing Lan Fei was able to know who the person was just by the voice. It was as if her body was struck by some immense aggrievement, and her body swayed and wavered in her spot. "You're going to kill me? You should have died long ago. If Mo Jingyu had not repeatedly shielded you, do you think that you will still be alive today?" The womanly voice said with a contemptuous sneer. "Give me one reason." Qing Lan Fei said with her eyes lowered, her long fingernails digging hard into her flesh. She just did not dare to believe, and neither could she make herself believe, that the person who was once as close to her as a real sister would now want to see her dead. Chapter 179. One, don't die. Do not abandon me, huh? Lan Fei, haven't you always thought so highly of yourself, thinking you're above everyone else? Haven't you always hated how Jingyu pestered you? Why have you forgotten the words you said when you were tangled up with him, and he just would not leave no matter how how hard you tried to drive him away. The woman's mirthful voice somehow made a person's heart turn cold. I had clearly fallen in love with him first, but why can't he see that? Instead, he just had to choose to love a person who ignores him all the time. Tell me, are men all so cheap and a glutton for punishment? When those words came out from her mouth, Mo Jingyu's good-looking face became pale, and the agonizing pain in his chest seemed to intensify with the appearance of the woman, his heart getting devoured more maniacally. She seemed to notice his agony, and the woman then said with a laugh, "Lan Fei, don't you know that I planted a love curse in his heart, and from then on, he can only have me in his mind, and can only love me. The moment he shows the slightest sign of being disloyal, the love curse would gnaw into his heart, till his heart fails and he dies. But does he fear death?" The woman's voice was filled with a kind of sadness and self-scorn. "Even if he were to die, he chose to die by your side, and if I had not threatened him with your life, how could he have possibly been willing to leave you? Lan Fei, why are you better than me in every way? Even this man's heart belongs to you fully. Didn't you say that you'll give way to me? You said that you do not care, and will let me have whatever I want. You lied, and now you must die for that. You've gone absolutely mad." Lan Fei's eyes grew fervid as she looked at the man beside her. She bit her lip and said in a choked voice, "Jingyu, I'm sorry. I dragged you into all this." "Foolish dear, don't cry." Mo Jingyu sighed. "It was my own choice and I did everything willingly." It looked as if she was angered by that warm and tender sight when the woman's voice turned sharp as she said, "Jingyu, have you forgotten what you promised me? Do you believe that I will kill her right this instant?" Mo Jingyu lowered his eyes and laughed softly, the mirth not reaching his eyes. His voice sounded dark, without the slightest warmth in it. "I was careless today to have fallen into your hands. You have better make sure that I do not have the chance to ever rise back up, or I will pay you back 100 times the humiliation I suffered today." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. If you want to kill Fei Air, you will have to do it stepping over my dead body here today. His voice was chillingly cold. The man always seemed to be passionate and warm, but he could also be heartlessly unfeeling. To him, love for a woman was all based on his feelings, and in this world, only Lan Fei could fully win his heart and have him care and protect with everything he had, unable to endure seeing her suffer the slightest sliver of aggrievement. Hidden from sight, the voice seemed to have been stunned by his words, quiet and silent for a moment. "Jingyu." Lan Fei held his hand worriedly. "Do not bother with me anymore. How can I not care about you?" Mo Jingyu interrupted her, and grasped her hand in a strong grip, his eyes deep as he gazed at the woman's beautiful countenance. Chapter 179. 2. Don't die. Do not abandon me, Fei Air. All the way from the first time we met, I have never once thought of letting you go. But as luck took a turn for the worse today, I fear the great years ahead you should have enjoyed, your whole grand future, might get buried here today. I am not afraid. Lan Fei shook her head. In order to be with you, I have no regrets even if I am to die here today. Fei Air, those words you said just now, I want to hear you say them one more time. Mo Jingyu disregarded the devouring pain that was like 1,000 blades piercing into his heart, ignoring the heart-rending agony, as he looked at the woman with a tender gaze to say, "Which words?" Lan Fei asked in bewilderment. Mo Jingyu laughed softly. "The words you said when you kissed me." Lan Fei did not hesitate in the slightest and opened her mouth to say softly, "I love you." Mo Jingyu laughed out loud, his fingers gently caressing her face. "I am very happy, Fei Air. I've heard those words in my dreams before, and hearing you say them from your lips makes me feel like I am dreaming. If we manage to survive this today, I will say it to you every day." Lan Fei said tenderly. "All right." The voice of the woman hidden in the shadows was not heard anymore. She had probably seen their resolve to live or die together. The enormous six-pointed star pentagram array suddenly gave off an intense light, and the sky turned the color of thick blood, a dark scarlet. A dark crow filled with the aura of death flew past overhead, letting out a pitiful wail. like it was mourning for the lives that were about to expire soon. Fei Er, move away from there. Mo Jingyu suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled her behind him, as he executed a palm strike that scattered the bones of the skeleton rushing straight towards him in attack. From the skeletal mouth of the blood-colored skeleton in the middle of the array, thousands upon thousands of skeletal figures crawled out, cackling sinisterly as they fully surrounded the two people, giving out a bloody and evil aura. It stemmed from the tens of thousands of aggrieved souls they had devoured, that assaulted one's mind, causing them to lose the will to fight. It felt as if there wasn't the slightest sliver of hope left, just the devastating premonition of certain and impending doom. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Jingyu found that he had underestimated how maniacal the woman could become, and underestimated how powerful the array had turned out to be. He had never thought that such an array used the ancients that only existed in legends would actually come to appear here, before his eyes today. His bright clear eyes seemed to glaze over for a second, unable to see anything but grisly and bloody slaughter. At that moment, he was just a machine that knew nothing but absolute massacre, his consciousness blinded. And seeing the flawlessly beautiful woman before him looking at him with a worried look on her face, his mind was conscious of the one and only order he received. Kill! Mo Jingyu's eyes turned the same blood-red shade as the sky above, his face expressionless as he looked at Qing Lan Fei. A sword suddenly appeared in his hand, which then came to be pointed right at the woman. The expression on Qing Lan Fei's face turned into shock. Jingyu. Chapter 179. 3. Don't die. Do not abandon me. The man's voice was icy cold as he shouted. Die. Jingyu, is something wrong? Qing Lan Fei did not avoid or dodge, but just stood there to ask him, her eyes not showing the slightest fear, because she knew that this man would never ever hurt her. And like she thought, upon seeing her stand there resolute and unmoving right before his eyes, Mo Jingyu's face hesitated a moment before a look of agony showed on it. He then struggled very hard to speak. Fei Er, leave. Quick. Qing Lan Fei could not possibly heed those words, and she lashed out with a strike to scatter the skeletons surging forward around them. The skeletons were all focused only on her, their attacks all directed towards her. Though as just a lone woman against the enemies, Qing Lan Fei's cultivated powers was not to be underestimated. She was not as frail and soft as her appearance portrayed, and she was considered to be a skilled expert in cloud heaven. But as she was greatly handicapped within this array of the ancients, she was disadvantaged and seen to be a little passive. It was probably because she was seen to still be able to hold her ground, when sneering laughter sounded in the distance. The hidden adversary parted her red lips and started to chant a spell. The very next moment, the blood skeleton in the middle flashed brightly with a red light, and two heavy metal chains that were as thick as a man's arm with sharp hooks on their ends suddenly came flying straight towards Qing Lan Fei's shoulders. A binding spell had been cast upon those chains, and if they were to hook into a person's shoulder blades, not only would the person immediately lose all their strength, their cultivation would be slowly destroyed over time, unable to regain back their powers till they die in torturous torment. How could Qing Lan Fei possibly not know what kind of an attack that was? The expression on her face immediately changed drastically, as she did everything she could to dodge the chains that were pursuing her like they had eyes on them. Mo Jingyu was still suffering from the curse as his heart was being devoured, and on top of that, he was still caught under the powerful effects the array was inflicting on him, a barely repressible and intense urge to kill Fei Er rising threateningly in him. He was fighting to suppress that urge, as his eyes were staring fixedly into a particular direction. There was no one in the direction he was looking into, but because of the love curse cast upon him, he was able to sense that the woman was there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mo Jingyu's eyes turned dark. Qing Luoyan. She is your younger sister. Do you really want to have her killed so badly? Younger sister? From the moment that she snatched you away, she was no longer my sister. The woman laughed scornfully. I was the one pestering her relentlessly, and she had nothing to do with it. If you need to hate someone, then let it be me. Ha 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 ha. After the woman let out a long maniacally laugh, she then reverted back to look like her usual gentle harmless self. Jingyu, I asked you this before. I do not mind you being with Lan Fei as she and I are already sisters. And since we are both in love with the same man, can't the three of us be happy all together? Things will just be the same as before. Chapter 179. For don't die. Do not abandon me, but what did you say to me at that time? You said you only have her in your heart, and there's no place for anyone else? Haha. In what way am I not able to compare to her? In terms of looks or temperament, I am better than her in every way. So why does it have to be her that you choose to fall in love with? You betrayed me, Lan Fei betrayed me. The two people I loved the most were the ones who hurt me the deepest. How can I possibly let the two of you off so easily? Mo Jingyu's eyes narrowed as he subconsciously looked at the woman, who was desperately trying to avoid the chains. A great number of skeletal hands suddenly lunged out from the ground to grab her ankles, holding her down trapped in place, and unable to move. And the chains with their sharp hooks were flying very quickly through the air straight towards Qing Lan Fei's shoulder blades. Her eyes flared wide open and her face turned pale. Just when her body went cold and her face was drained of color, a warm-blooded body suddenly embraced her tightly from behind. That warm body then twitched once violently, becoming incredibly tightly tensed up. Even though the sound was soft, she had heard that stifled grunt, and the sound of something sharp piercing into a person's body, which was agonizing to hear. Jingyu. Qing Luo Yin then came out of hiding, her face with highly exquisite features covered in tears, as she looked at him with disbelief in her eyes. Why were you so foolish? Qing Lan Fei had just recovered from stunned shock, and she realized that the person hugging her from behind was Jingyu. The arms embracing her so tightly then slowly loosened their hold on her, before a thud was heard. It was the sound of his knee hitting the ground. Qing Lan Fei stiffly turned her head around to look, and she found her eyes suddenly turning misty. The man's black robes were soaked through, as bright red liquid droplets dripped off the corners of his clothes onto the ground, staining soil a frightening red shade. He knelt there on the ground on one knee, his head drooping down, two thick chains deeply embedded into his shoulders. Among the grisly mess of blood and flesh, the ghastly white of bone could be seen. In that instant, her ears could not hear anything at all. She stood them in a daze as she stared at the man on the ground with his head drooped down, remaining so quiet it looked as if he was already dead. That was Mo Jingyu, the willfully arrogant and incredibly powerful man who saw himself above all in this world. The man who remembered the words she said casually for a very long time. The man she really cared for with all her heart. The man who had tyrannically come barging into her life so forcefully. The man whom she had come to love right into her bones. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU her man, Qing Lan Fei's man. The woman's eyes were red around the rims, like she was about to cry, but she was trying her very best to hold it in. She came walking slowly right in front of him, and then crouched down close, to call out softly, Jingyu. Will you look at me? Can you not remain silent? I will be good and listen to you. Please don't ignore me. Her voice trembled, on the very verge of tears, tinged with a submissiveness never heard before. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.